This video was put together to highlight a majority of the tasks carried out by PRG to install and commission the new fly camp between the 1st of February 2023 and April 10, 2023. 112 single persons quarters were transported from other sites and installed. 1 administration building, 1 wet mess, a gymnasium, and 2 storage containers were installed. Bore pump MCP-10 was installed, and the pipework to the new camp connected for later use. New buildings for the completion of the main camp were delivered by McNally and stored in the areas shown. More buildings are still to be delivered by McNally. The buildings delivered by McNally were unloaded and placed on blocks by McNally staff using a 20-ton forklift. A clear traffic management plan was in place due to narrow entry roads to the fly camp. All open pipework or entry points for animals or insects were blocked. All drains were taped up internally as well. McNally and Atlas staff spent many days cleaning up the exploration laydown area and cleaning out 2 40-foot sea containers for later use. Flow Water Services were installing pipework to several bores and used the McNally storage area as a laydown yard to weld pipes and to uncoil and straighten pipework. McNally's telehandler was removed from site as it was no longer required. All doors on the newly delivered buildings were taped shut after an internal inspection of the rooms for transport damage. This is to stop dust entry. Atlas Roller 95 was delivered to site. Staff continued to clean up at the MSA in preparation for the construction water work. This area was to be the main laydown area for Flow Water Services. The PRG grader and the PRG 20-ton excavator arrived on site. Numerous new 4 single-person quarters were delivered by McNally's and stored in Area 1. Bore MCP-1 was fitted and headworks completed. Fencing and signage was erected around the old caravan site to protect the original septic system and the existing electrical cabling in the ground. Bore MCP-10 is removed and a new pump is to be fitted tomorrow. PRG begins conditioning and compacting soil for the camp pad. The PRG grader and the water truck are operational and working on the camp pad. The genset and fuel pod are installed at Bore MCP-1. Atlas Wheel Loader 31 and Dozer DZ60 arrive on site. Bore MCP-1 is connected up to the genset. Bore MCP-10 has a new pump fitted. The PRG office arrives on site. The Atlas telehandler arrives. Bore MCP-152 is installed. PRG continues earthworks for the village pad. The genset and fuel pod are delivered to Bore 152. More PRG equipment arrives on site. All McNally buildings are placed on blocks for storage. The geotech investigation begins. A majority of equipment and vehicles needed for PRG to carry out their work is now on site. Today the actual accumulated work progress reached the accumulated projected work progress for the first time. The project is now on schedule. The geotech samples are ready for pickup. PRG continues with the camp pad. The McNally Traffic Management Plan has been clearly explained to all work groups. Signage and flagging has been placed where required to stop interaction with other large vehicles when delivering new buildings. The project actual progress is now running ahead of the projected progress. Flow water services are continuing with installation of various bore pipelines and the removal of pipes from the laydown area. PRG starts digging trenches for building services at each row of buildings. Building pads have been compacted. Open trenches are now being barricaded by PRG to prevent access to unauthorized personnel. Installation of the bore pipeline from MCP1 to the MAS has been started by Flow Water Services. The area containing the complete village upgrade has now been barricaded completely by PRG to restrict access to the work area. New McNally buildings are still being delivered and stored in Storage Area 1. Heavy rain floods the trenches. This caused a delay in the work progress, and the trenches needed to be cleaned out and more bedding sand added. The trenches are in the process of drying out, then they will be cleaned out and fresh bedding sand added. Services have begun to be placed into the trenches. Even though time was lost due to the heavy rain, actual progress did not decrease for the day. Other works were carried out. Welding on the bore pipeline from MCP01 to the MSA is nearly completed. The pad for the gymnasium installation is started. Further services are being installed into the building trenches. Barricading with 2 entry points is being maintained to restrict unauthorized entry. Heavy rain once again restricted progress on the camp pad, with trenches filling with water once again. The pipeline from bore MCP-01 is connected to the headworks. Progress was delayed by the heavy rain on this day, but the project is still ahead of the planned schedule. Buildings from McNally's are being stored in the laydown area number 2. Flow Water Services remove all the remaining pipes from laydown area number 2 and move them to a new storage area at MCP-01. The gymnasium pad has been completed, and concrete donuts placed for the 3 gymnasium sections. PRG installed an information board at both barricade entrances to the camp extension pad work area. Flow Water Services dug the first road crossing for the pipeline sleeve for the pipeline to the new village from MCP-10. Buildings transferred from Mount Dove begin to arrive on site. The Ashburton crane arrives on site and sets up on the pad. Donuts have been placed for the new buildings. The first 2 buildings are placed in position on the donuts. Flow Water Services completes the second road crossing for the bore pipeline to the new village. The Ashburton crane was logged in the registered equipment log. All paperwork was inspected and verified by site personnel. Ten blocks of accommodation were placed in position on the concrete donuts on this day. MCP-01 bore line was pressure tested by Flow Water Services. Three blocks of accommodation were placed in position on the concrete donuts on this day. More McNally buildings are delivered and stored in the laydown area too. The gym pad has been completed, and donuts placed ready for the building. Connections of water, sewer, electrical and communications is ongoing. 13 accommodation blocks have been placed in position at this stage. Installation of the 3 sections of the gymnasium commences using the 20-ton forklift. Work commences on the wet mess pad. 17 accommodation blocks are now in place. The 2 sections of the wet mess are placed into position. The first laundry building is placed into position. The pad for the 2 storage containers is started. Room air conditioners are being reinstalled and commissioned. 23 accommodation buildings, 1 laundry, the wet mess and the gym are in position ready for connections. The pad for the 2 storage containers is completed. Work on completing the gymnasium continues. The last 3 days have exceeded the project progress that was planned for. All 28 accommodation blocks, 112 single-person quarters, are now sitting in position. The 2 sea containers are placed on their pad near the medic's room. The second laundry was installed using the 20-ton forklift. Exploration drilling has started in the mining area. Drill pads are being cleared first. Work is continuing on the installation of the 2 sea containers, the gymnasium and the wet mess. The sewage line from the new extension to the new pump pit was started. Hard rock was found in this area, which took longer than expected to clear.
The wet mess bar area and cool room are commissioned.
The trench for the new sewage and power lines was started. Clearing is started at the back of the existing camp and the new extension to comply with fire regulations.
Laundries were being commissioned and cleaned. All faulty washing machines and dryers were replaced. The ice machine and water cooler were installed. All air conditioners, plumbing, lighting and other room services were being commissioned.
The pipeline from pad is bored to the camp water tanks is buried. All exposed PVC piping has sun protection fitted. The two pieces of the administration building are placed on their pad.
The gymnasium equipment is cleaned and set up for use. Work is still continuing on the gymnasium. The inside of the administration building is cleaned and the torn and damaged vinyl is repaired. The loading dock for the wet mess was completed. Work continued on commissioning the wet mess.
Work begins on the first verandas. Veranda posts are concreted into position in a majority of the buildings. Atlas Dozer DZ61 is delivered to site. Roofing is being fitted to the verandas. Quick-set concrete was used on all veranda posts. A large bushfire is seen in the background. This burned for several days. Grid mesh was installed on all walkways and held together with stainless steel cable ties. The Action Drilling Geotech drill rig arrived on site. Action Drilling was involved in test drilling, just off the entry road to the camp. They were looking for suitable road material. The camp is in the background of the drill rig photo. Action Drilling drilled 4 holes at this location. The new sewage pump station for the camp extension is commissioned and tested. Electrical pits are installed, and wiring connections are ongoing. Work on the verandas continues, and walkways in front of the buildings are compacted ready for the grid mesh to be installed.
Work continues on plumbing up and commissioning all hot water systems and room air conditioners.
The geotech work is completed, and the holes are capped. Work continues on the commissioning of the gymnasium. PRG now uses a pressure washer and the vacuum truck to locate the existing sewage and electrical services at the end of the old caravan bay. The electrical line has been isolated and tagged out at the switchboard. The electrical service line from the switchboard to the old caravan bays was also exposed between the switchboard and the bays. The main electrical cable from the camp extension is run in the trench, past the administration building and towards the switchboard. Bedding sand has been used. This is the exposed electrical cable to the old caravan bays. It was exposed so the location is known for when the digger starts trenching in the area. Extensive water blasting and vacuuming was required to expose the cabling and unknown pipework in front of the switchboard. The existing sewage lines and communications ran through this area, but were meant to be many meters away. The extra work was rewarded by finding the extra pipework before trenching. Trenches were dug right up to the plinth of the switchboard. A small excavator was used for this task. Electrical wiring and terminations were being completed around the extension of the camp to be ready for the hookup to the main power. The installation of the verandas and roofing was continuing. Hot water systems were being installed and commissioned. The electrical conduit is installed from the camp to the switchboard. The electrical cables are pulled through to the switchboard ready for termination. The trench for the new sewer line to the wastewater treatment plant is dug. The existing underground power lines for the wastewater treatment plant are exposed prior to digging the last section of the trench.
The PXD drilling program starts. The drill pads have all been made ready for the drill rig. Drilling is to start at MCDH0064. Connecting the new power cables to the switchboard. Power was off to site for approximately 6 hours. Work continued at the wet mess. The communications trench was dug from the Asset Link office to the first laundry. Drainage work between the buildings is underway. Grid mesh has been installed on the walkways. The majority of the Sun City work has been completed, so their vehicles are demobilized. All rooms are now being thoroughly cleaned. External drainage work is underway. All of the trenches for the new sewer and electrical conduits are backfilled and compacted. The external drainage for the camp and the associated culverts are completed. The storage racks and shelving are fitted to the sea container. The flooring of the sea container was replaced. The original plywood was rotten. The rock breaker was used on the communications trench near the laundry. Hard rock was uncovered. This activity slowed progress for one day. The communications trench between the Asset Link offices and the new laundry is almost complete. The communications cabling is complete. The trench is backfilled and compacted. Major cleanup work is underway inside the rooms and all external areas. All air conditioners and hot water systems have been installed and commissioned. The area between the buildings is cleaned up. The large drains on the edges of the camp are completed. The cleanup of all areas of the camp is still underway. The inside of the wet mess is cleaned and the torn and damaged vinyl is repaired. The ice machine and drink fountain are connected up in the laundry. All washing machines and dryers are tested for operation in both laundries. Grid mesh and concrete steps are fitted outside all rooms. All signage was placed on building and building doors. All footpaths are now complete. Grid mesh has been installed to all areas. Commissioning of the wet mess continues. Grid mesh was installed to the entrances of the sea containers. The new sewage pump station has been commissioned. Windrows are provided to stop vehicles driving in this area. The pumps were tested and are operational. All buildings are now in place. Final commissioning and punch listing is occurring. This is an overview of the new installation filmed on the 8th of April. Some minor defects are still being completed, but the job finished ahead of schedule and with no major issues.